You know how it goes in fitness, everything's polarizing somehow. But one thing that I think we can all get on board with is, hey, warming up, generally a good idea. For example, if you bench press 225 for reps, you're not just going to walk in there and bench press 225 for reps. Congrats, by the way. That's a big milestone to bench press 225. Just to bench press 225, but for reps, let's just say this is your working weight. If you just walked in there and did it, it'd be risky, and you probably wouldn't be able to get the most out of your 225 bench press. You'd be like, bro, let me get a little warm up, and then I'll show you what I can do. Warming up is exactly what it sounds like. You're warming up the tissue that you are about to use. Warm tissue is less prone to injury and just performs better. When we're newbies, we don't think about this too much. We should, like a lot of things, but we don't. It really doesn't require a whole lot of strategy because you're relatively weak at this point. Eventually, you start to develop patterns and schemes in order to get to your working weight. The issue is that we usually develop these patterns in the early intermediate phase and continue to adopt these same patterns, these same styles as we progress and we find ourselves, say, in the late intermediate stage. And at this point, you're just not the same bodybuilder any longer. What I generally see happen with intermediates when they warm up is they just use too much damn energy to get to the sets, to the loads that they are targeting. Think of your working sets as a sprint. A sprinter would not arrive to the starting blocks huffing and puffing, but this is precisely what I see intermediates do way too often. Remember, you want to warm up the tissue you want to train. You want to groove the movement some, and you only want this preparation phase to be as long as it needs to be. This is so you can salvage your energy for the big sets, for the working sets. This is going to look a little different from person to person, and even within the same individual, from exercise to exercise, it might look a little different. Keep that in mind as I share with you guys one of my favorite build-up, warm-up schemes that I like to teach my intermediates who are trying to get better at the skill of getting to their working sets as prepared, but as fresh as possible. Firstly, you need to know roughly what weight you're going to use today. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just a rough range is good enough. For the sake of this example, let's assume that it's going to be in the 6 to 12 rep range, which is kind of ideal because that is where most bodybuilders spend the majority of their time anyways. Remember, this is mostly for compounds, for multiple joint movements, things like a leg press, a hack squat, a rowing variation, a pressing variation, things like that. When it comes to isolation, it's much simpler, but if you guys want some examples of how to do that, let me know in the comment section. Very simple. First set, 20 to 30% of the estimated load of the working set, and you're going to do this 10 to 15 times, 10 to 15 reps. Then you move up to 40 to 50% of the working load weight, and you perform this load for 4 to 6 reps. We move it up to 60 to 70% of this load for 4 to 6 reps, put it away, and then we move up to 80 to 90%, somewhere in there, for 1 or 2 reps. Usually I hit this last warm-up for 1 or 2 reps. If I don't feel right, I'll put it back, come back, hit it again for 1 or 2 reps. But basically, I'll stop this last warm-up, the warm-up before I get to my training load, as soon as I get a rep that feels normal, that feels grooved, that feels as easy as it should. Now let's translate what this would look like for our 225 stud junior. And I think a lot of the experienced guys out there are like, yeah, well, duh, like that's kind of what I do anyways. Okay, that's great. But there's a lot of people out there who have just arrived to this like mid-level, late-level intermediate phase. And usually what they would do is these loads you see here, they might skip a few. This is what they usually do. However many reps they are going to get with their heavyweight for the day, that's what they do with everything, including like the set right before the true working set. And what ends up happening is these guys make it to their working weights, but in a more fatigued state than they need to be, and it can make for some pretty erratic performances. With that said, our Sud Jr. finally arrived. He's at 225, feeling fresh and ready to go. And that bench press that he's been thinking about all week is clicking as well as he had imagined leading up to this training session. Oh, again, you don't have to memorize these percentages and do it exactly the way it's written out. You just have to have a good understanding of what it is that we're trying to do here, what it is that we're trying to do when we warm up. You have to look at your working set much in the same way that a rock climber looks at a wall he's about to scale up. So they're at ground level, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, that seems like the most reasonable path. And of course, as you're doing the damn thing, you might have to change things a little bit depending on how you feel. But the goal is to get there as fresh as possible so that you can perform at your best. Over the course of time, this will change as you get stronger, older, and from one movement to the next. What you're trying to accomplish with your warm-up sets, the general scheme itself is going to stay the same.